Welcome everyone, Tactical Lich here, and today we have a battle replay submitted by Darty Singh featuring Tomb Kings vs Tzeentch. For the army builds, Darty Singh as the Tomb King player is going for quite a missile heavy approach with two Ushabtis with great bows and a single Bone Giant. The Bone Giant has armor piercing, anti-large and magical damage, theoretically makes it great against the Tzeentch single entities. For the infantry support, a front line of skeleton warriors backed up by some skeleton spears and two more necropolis knights with halberds for their anti-large armor piercing attacks plus poison debuff. For the leadership, we have Cetra the Imperishable on his Cambrian War Sphinx, featuring the Neru's Incantation of Protection, which is a physical resistance spell that is quite useless against Tzeentch, who are all magical attack units. And then the Jav's Incantation of Curse Blades, providing some nice damage boosts, while the items and abilities are the Blessed Blade of Petra and Wrath of Petra. Both of them gives Tomb Kings an additional source of magical damage against the Tzeentch demons. As for the Tzeentch player, I assume they didn't buy the Tzeentch DLC, so there are no new DLC units. Going rather melee heavy here with a whole line of Chaos Warriors plus a single Blue Horror, supported by a Soul Grinder plus a single Chaos Chariot unit. Very likely trying to grind through all the skeletons with heavy armor. In the skies, there are quite a bit of investments in the Tzeentch Air Force, two Screamers of Tzeentch, Knights of Immolation for their fiery bombardment, as well as an Exalted Lord of Change, possibly bringing this lord in for the pink fire to clear out skeleton blobs. Blue fire, of course, is also there to exploit the Tomb King's character's fire weaknesses. And then the Portal Glyph for the Chaos Fury summon. That's it for the army builds, and now let's get the battle started. It's been quite a while since we saw a proper artillery fight, with both sides bringing single entity artillery here. Actually, the Tzeentch army even has a single entity artillery lord, as the Exalted Lord of Change will be opening up with a blue fire, most of the shots actually missing Cetra, but still doing some pretty good damage, all thanks to the additional fire weakness from the Warp Flame effect and the, of course, innate fire weakness of Cetra and all Tomb King characters. However, the Bone Giant plus the Ushabti with great bows will be returning fire with a bit of armor piercing shots, though the Exalted Lord of Change, a flying unit, can easily dodge by juking back and forth. There is no healing for Tzeentch though, so whatever HP losses they took will be permanent. The Soul Grinder is also moving into firing position. It can aim at Cetra the Imperishable, but right now the Bone Giant is firing at it because the Bone Giant does outrange the Soul Grinder. Now, despite both monsters have anti-large damage on their missiles, this trait is actually not the greatest for the Soul Grinder because the physical resistance it relies on to protect itself is negated by the magical missiles of the Bone Giant. The Bone Giant also has over 10,000 HP compared to the 8,000 max on the Soul Grinder. The Bone Giant has way more survivability than the Soul Grinder, as they do have similar missile strength. Especially with Crumbling Mechanic being stronger than the Demon Fading Mechanic, the Bone Giant will still be standing when the Soul Grinder is dead. The Blue Horrors are chucking their Warp Flame at Cetra, but Cetra is doing just fine with the heavy armor. Even with the fire weakness, he does compensate it with his innate missile resistance, just like all other characters. The front line though, Chaos Warriors are moving in, charging straight for the Skeleton Warriors. Their elite melee stats heavy armor should be able to deal with the skeletons just fine, especially if the Lord of Change provides some fire support with the pink fire of Tzeentch. At the back there, the Necropolis Knights trying to fend off all these Knights of Immolation, though the Ushabtis on the left are taking substantial losses already, all thanks to the Screamers diving down with their anti-large armor piercing attacks. The Tzeentch chariots also charged into the fray, but they seems to be stuck on the Tomb King's monstrosities. Some summoned furies try to tie down the other Ushabtis, but unfortunately they are screened out by the Necropolis Knights, as the Ushabti with great bows were able to retreat into a safe position to fire it once again. The Lord of Change also dropped down, but he probably wants to stay away from Cetra as far as possible. On the other flank, the Tzeentch chariots are paying the ultimate price for being stuck among a bunch of armor piercing and anti-large units. The Screamers too being beaten down pretty hard, being debuffed by poison as well. At the far back, the Soul Grinder is still trying to duel the Bone Giant, but as you can see here, the Soul Grinder has taken substantial amount of damage, while the Bone Giant is still relatively healthy at over 10k HP still. At this point, the Soul Grinder might as well just charge into melee because it is not winning this missile fight. The front line though is definitely going in favor of Tzeentch, though the Skeleton Warriors are buying enough time for the Tomb Kings to secure its back line. Knights of Immolation charging into the rather weakened Ushabtis with great bows, working down the last bit of their HP, but the Necropolis Knights with halberds with their anti-large armor piercing will be counter-charging in with the support of Skeleton Spears. The Knights of Immolation will be taking a lot of losses that they are not willing to afford, and they will be backing up right now, trying to minimize losses for now, as the Screamers of Tzeentch, after holding back for quite a while, will be moving into combat as well. Now, Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch are surrounding the Bone Giant. Yes, the Bone Giant is armor piercing, but the melee stats are quite pathetic, so the Warriors can actually grind down the Bone Giant pretty nicely. Naru's Incantation of Protection will not be doing anything against the Tzeentch army, as all of them has magical damage, but it does provide a tiny bit of healing for the Tomb Kings, as it does trigger the lore passive of Nehekara. It doesn't recover that much HP, but it is still a map-wide heal nonetheless. At the far back there, with the Bone Giant silenced by a bunch of Chaos Warriors, the Soul Grinder actually managed to recharge its Tzeentch barrier, now shooting at the Necropolis Knights trying to whittle down the Tomb King elites. While in the front line, Ushabti Summon has been dropped in the middle of all of these Chaos Warriors, trying to bail out the Bone Giant, as the flanks there, all these Chaos Warriors are slowly collapsing into the middle fight. Some of them are even driving into the back line, trying to silence the Ushabti with great bows, though there are some Skeleton Spears in reserve holding them back for now. Luckily for the Tomb Kings, the Necropolis Knights are here to reinforce. With their armor piercing, they should do decently against the Chaos Armored Infantry. Now, in the middle there, the batch of Chaos Warriors being routed off means that the Bone Giant is free to shoot again, aiming back at the Soul Grinder. It takes like, what, 2-3 hits, and the Soul Grinder should be fading away from reality. Another blue fire aiming at the Bone Giant, taking out some noticeable amount of HP, though it still has over 1/3 of its HP, not gonna crumble anytime soon. With the Soul Grinder running low on health, the Bone Giant should be able to finish it without any issues. The Exalted Lord of Change casts another spell, this time the pink fire, really trying to clear out those skeleton chaff. But that's not gonna save the Screamers or the Chaos Warriors, who are already rather tattered. Especially the routable Chaos Warriors, who will probably get terrified as soon as Cetra shows up with his War Sphinx. At the back there, a massive bombardment, tier 3 Tzeentch ability, knocking out quite a bit of HP from these Ushabtis with great bows, but unfortunately most of the Necropolis Knights were able to dodge away from this bombardment. Even the Ushabtis that got hit mostly have their units intact, ready to fire and kite once more. The balance of power looks quite even right now, but I do think that the Tzeentch army has a major disadvantage, with only their Lord holding everything together. The Tomb Kings still have most of their armor-piercing fighting power, while the Knights of Immolation is the only thing left intact in the Tzeentch army. On the side note, we have been kind of neglecting Cetra for most of the game. He didn't actually do that much damage over the course of battle, but he is still a very important anti-infantry armor-piercing entity that can easily deal with all those Chaos Warriors. He still has quite a bit of health, and there's not a lot of armor-piercing firepower left for the Tzeentch army. The Soul Grinder is completely out of ammo, while the Exalted Lord of Change here relying on the blue fire to do any damage, but all those blue fire are aiming at the Bone Giant for now. Not aiming Cetra the Imperishable might be an issue here, as the Tzeentch army doesn't really have any options to deal with a heavily armored elite fighter. Ushabtis continue to kite, while the Necropolis Knights with halberds are holding back the tide of heavy metal Tzeentch infantry. At the same time, another Tzeentch army bombardment incoming. This time is a tier 2 ability aiming at Cetra only, knocking out quite a bit of his health, but still, that's not quite gonna be enough to finish him off, as he still have over 7,000 HP. We'll be going into fast forward here as the Ushabti continues to kite and work down the Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch with their armor-piercing firepower. Blue Horrors moving into shooting distance. The Bone Giant, unfortunately, will be falling to the sword and board of the Chaos Warriors, but at the back there, the Necropolis Knights are definitely holding the line, now joining forces with Cetra, who had just finished off the Soul Grinder. The Ushabtis are also back with their armor-piercing missiles, and the Chaos Warriors are basically sitting ducks. At this point, the Tzeentch Air Force is too weak to contest the Ushabtis, heavily protected by the Tomb King's elites, and the Tzeentch player will be throwing the towel. GG to both players, and now let's have a quick rundown of army performances. The Bone Giant definitely earned back quite a bit of value here, but the MVP is definitely the Necropolis Knight, providing some very valuable anti-large armor piercing that fended off the Knights of Immolation as well as the Screamers of Tzeentch, using their mass to pin down enemy units and allow the Ushabti with great bows to escape to safety. One of them earned back some value and a chevron, while the rest of the army are pretty much just chaff skeletons, so not much to talk about them. As for Cetra the Imperishable, did some pretty good damage, and considering that he still have quite a bit of health remain in the late game, he was definitely doing a decent job in the battle. As for the Tzeentch army here, the Exalted Lord of Change did quite a bit of damage with the blue fire spam, just not really enough to carry the game, while the Soul Grinder, in a very poor trade against the Bone Giant, didn't quite earn back its value. The Knights of Immolation as well took a lot of losses in the melee fights against all the armor piercing units and was not able to earn back their cost. The Chaos Warriors got countered by all those AP units on the Tomb King side, while the mobility was slightly misused by the Tzeentch player, only one of the Screamers really earning back some value, while the Blue Horrors not really doing much throughout the battle. And yeah, that's all for today. I hope you all enjoyed the battle, and if you want to see more Total War Warhammer content, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.